All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Carlos, aka CJ. And tonight I am very excited to be joined by Donald Rainwater, who is the Libertarian Party candidate for governor in the state of Indiana. And there's so many reasons why this interview, this discussion is just so important in terms of everything that's transpired this past year. I think it's, we're going to go into further discussion regarding it, but it's just so important right nowadays to really focus on not only the local elections regarding the state, your city council, your mayor, your governor. And I think there's no better time for this discussion. So, Donald, want to welcome you to the interview, and thank you so much for affording me the opportunity. And welcome to the show.
Well, Carlos, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience about the important issues that face Hoosiers today.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think we should start with, Donald, is if you could please share a little bit more about your background with the people that are tuning in who may or may not have heard of Donald Rainwater, and a little bit of your bio, please.
Sure. I am a lifelong Hoosier. I was born on the east side of Indianapolis, was raised pretty much on the east side of Indianapolis, spent a little time in Greenfield, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, graduated from Warren Central High School in 1981, went to a semester of college down in Greenville, South Carolina. Some of you might be familiar with Bob Jones University. Came back. My father was laid off for about a month, did not have the money to keep me in school, came back, and finally decided that the best thing for me to do at that particular moment in time was join the military. I went and joined the United States Navy, was in the Navy as a yeoman for 8 years, spent 4 years, almost 4 years on sea duty, about 2.5 of that in Norfolk, Virginia, and then about a year in San Diego, California on the USS Kitty Hawk. Re-enlisted, came back to Indiana, spent 4 years on shore duty here in central Indiana, and got out of the Navy, got into teaching computer classes, managed a few small businesses for other people, and then about 22 years ago, started getting involved in software development, software engineering, got several Microsoft certifications, moved into management about 7 years ago. I currently hold the Project Management Professional certification and the Certified Scrum Master certification. Currently in software engineering and software development. And part of that experience was working on projects for the state of Indiana. I spent about 3 years almost daily at the Indiana Government Center and witnessed firsthand how things are done, how money is spent, or if you will, in many cases, misspent, mishandled. And in 2016, I decided that I was really kind of done with the idea of sitting and hearing what was going on in state government, watching what was going on, and just being unhappy about it. So I decided it was time to get up and get involved. And when I looked around the landscape of politics, especially in Indiana, it occurred to me that probably the closest that I would find to a political party that espoused my viewpoint was the Libertarian Party. I had grown up. My father was a United Auto worker, worked at the Ford plant in Indianapolis, for about 41 years. grew up going to church pretty much every time the doors opened. So I was able to get both the Democrat version of things and the Republican version of things as I grew up, and was able to see the strengths and weaknesses in both viewpoints as those two parties started to change over the years. And I believe that, if you will, the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, the Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy, those things don't exist anymore. And the parties of today, I like to tell people that, as the Democrats have drifted further and further left, that the Republicans feel like they need to slide over and pick up the people that the Democrats are losing. But in doing so, they're losing the base of what I consider the Reagan conservative. And we may not agree on everything, but I believe from a fiscal standpoint and from a constitutional and freedom standpoint, I believe that the Libertarian Party's platform much more closely mirrors the Republican platforms from the 70s and 80s. So I got involved in the Libertarian Party, and of course, then here we are.
Yeah, Donald, thank you for that introduction. And you stated so much that resonated with me, sir. In part, first of all, thank you for a lifetime of service to our country. We're forever indebted to you and your sacrifice for that. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Yes. And then ideally, jumping into the ideas of the Libertarian Party and, speaking in terms of individual liberty and freedom, could you please share what those ideas of liberty and freedom mean to you, sir?
Absolutely. And I'm going to start by saying that I think it's really important, especially in the environment that we find ourselves in 2020, that we realize that there are a wide variety of interpretations of each party's platform, and that each one of those interpretations is based on personal experience and personal knowledge. So when I talk about the libertarian platform, I always start with the root of that word, which is liberty. And to me, the concept of liberty was best described in the Declaration of Independence, and the idea that all people are created equal, and that we all have rights, whether we believe in a deity or just natural rights, however you want to say it. The basic concept is that our rights come from nature, and we have rights that belong to us. And those rights, included in those rights, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then he said something really important in the Declaration of Independence. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And I think that one of the things that we really, really need to understand about libertarianism is the idea that we're not anarchists. Now, there are people within the Libertarian Party who refer to themselves as anarchists, but they have a vision of minimal government. I have a vision of minimal government. And I believe that the Libertarian Party, regardless of how you interpret the individual platform planks, it's all about limited, minimal government, and as here again Ronald Reagan put it, self-rule. Me deciding for myself. and that government's place is as a shield to protect us and protect our rights, not as a sword, definitely not as a sledgehammer, and not to protect us from ourselves. And so I think to a great extent, the basic foundation of libertarianism is keeping government limited in order to keep our rights maximized.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you nailed it. Like, I don't think that could have been better framed in terms of, resonating. And I think that, that message transcends across party lines. And that's something that I really want to emphasize. And in your introduction, you said it specifically that at one time, in regards to the Democratic and the Republican Party and their fundamentals of their principal beliefs, and how it's the last several years has kind of drifted. And there's a lot of uncertainty, with that. But the ideas of individual liberty, the individual freedom, resonates and transcends across party lines. Those are things that when you stated that, what our freedoms and our liberty come from the rights instituted from God, not from government. And I think that speaks volumes of the current situation that we're in. When we see the government step in for the most part, in a lot of ways, and institute some of the policy, some of the mandates that have really, were made a negative impact in terms of the economy, in terms of jobs and everything that's accompanied. My gosh, Donald, I could never have envisioned the start of 2020 that would be in the situation that we're currently in.
Oh, absolutely. If you had told me, if you had painted this picture for me a year ago, I would have told you that you're obviously smoking something that you shouldn't have gotten a hold of, because it's not very good stuff.
Amen.
This is nobody's dream. And I tell people all the time, I keep thinking that I'm going to wake up in a hospital bed somewhere, and that I've, had an accident or something and been in a coma, and this was all just a figment of my imagination. Unfortunately, it's not. And I don't know. I'm sure you and most of your audience have heard of George Orwell in 1984. When I was a senior in high school, we read a book called Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And I remember reading that and thinking, how in the world could a society ever let itself get to that point? And then I look now and I go, here we are. And obviously you've pulled up my Facebook page here. And this is my campaign website. If you have not been to my campaign website, the URL is rainwaterforindiana.com. And of course, you can go there and you can see my take on the issues. You'll notice that my my moniker for this campaign is life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness as defined by the individual. And I think it's important that we look at our individual freedom and say, we're supposed to have these things as defined by us, not the government. The government should not be telling us, this is what, here are your property rights. I believe that property rights in particular are extremely important. A lot of people don't realize that even while life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are written in the Declaration of Independence that in the 14th Amendment, James Madison says life, liberty, property. And he adds property as a right, the ownership of property. And I'll just go ahead and at this point mention the fact that one of the things that I believe it's important for us as Hoosiers to try to get done in the next 4 years is eliminating the personal property tax on your primary residence. Because you can't own something that you have to pay the government twice a year for the right to keep it. And, pardon me, one of the great travesties of our society today are senior citizens, Hoosiers who build a home, raise their children. This is their forever home. But when they get ready to retire, they realize that they can no longer maintain that home because they can't afford the property taxes anymore. Now, I live in Westfield, Indiana. We have one of the fastest growing property tax assessments in the state. And it's because local government here has decided to use tax increment financing to enhance and exponentially speed up development in Westfield. And there are people who can no longer afford their home. And that's wrong. And government should, asset forfeiture, in my opinion, for any reason, is wrong. Government works for us. We don't work for them. And that's another reason why I believe we need to eliminate the personal income tax in the state of Indiana, because it is completely and utterly wrong for someone else to take your money before you get it. And if you look at your paycheck, the government is getting money from you before you get your money. I remember and it was probably in the 80s. I think it was a McDonald's commercial, a teenager getting their first paycheck and going, "Who's FICA and what are they doing with my money?"
Yes.
And if you remember that, it was funny then, but at the age of 56, it's not funny anymore. I want my money. I earned that money. And I believe that each one of you earned that money. And the government does not have a right to our money. And I will go as far, because there are people that, when I say that, have said, well, there's a constitutional amendment that the federal government yeah, well, there was a constitutional amendment outlawing alcohol. They realized that was wrong and they repealed it. I believe we need to repeal the federal income tax, but we also need to get rid of the personal income tax here in Indiana, because right now we are in one of the worst economic situations that the state of Indiana has ever seen, if not the worst. And we have seen small businesses completely and utterly decimated. And the only way we're going to recover from that is to give people their money back, let them keep their money, and small business owners, whether you're a sole proprietorship or an LLC or a partnership, most all of those small businesses pay their business taxes through their personal income tax. So if you want small businesses to grow, don't tax them. Let them take that money, reinvest it. Let them spend it. People say, well, how are you going to replace that income? Say, well, first of all, if you give people their money, they'll spend it. The vast majority of us will spend our money. And I haven't said anything about doing away with the sales tax. Now, would we like to eventually do that? Sure. But right now, if we put more money in individual Hoosiers' pockets, if we give them their money back, then that will help to reinvigorate our economy. Because small business, not corporations from out of state or even out of the country, those corporations, that's not the foundation of our economy in Indiana. Those corporations will come in here, they will get the tax abatements that we give them, and when those tax abatements are over, they will look for another state that will give them a tax abatement. And if you want to see the economic results of building your economy on big corporate America, look at places like Kokomo, Anderson, the east side of Indianapolis where I grew up, places where the auto industry built the area, but then when the auto industry died and left, those areas were decimated because too many people were dependent upon big corporate jobs. And one of the things that our current governor keeps talking about are all these big corporate jobs. And today he'll tell you that, before the pandemic, there were 85,000 unfilled high-tech jobs in Indiana. But he'd also tell you that he wants to bring in more. Well, what good does it do to bring in jobs that aren't getting filled by Hoosiers? And what good does it do if those industries at some point turn around and leave? We need a foundation economically based on Hoosier businesses and Hoosier growth.
Yeah, Donald, very well said. It sounds like your approach is to really take a common sense approach to government and limited government. What else is your vision for Indiana, Donald, as it relates to individual medical freedom? So we talked a little bit around taxation and what taxation means, and I think that you nailed it in terms of not allowing government to decide and pick and choose who are the winners and losers versus just lowering taxes and allowing stakeholders to remain and contain and hold their own earnings that they have. Yeah. So what are your thoughts in regards to individual liberty in regards to medical freedom? And because I think that's going to be a hot topic as we looked at like so many of the mandates in regards to the mask and, potentially upcoming, we're seeing neighboring states have instituted mandatory vaccination and those things. And what are your thoughts on those, Donald?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm going to even back up before the pandemic, and I'm going to make a statement that I think we all understand. The term Affordable Care Act was anything but. And the reason that it wasn't affordable is because government got involved in healthcare. Government mandated something, requiring everybody to do something. And when you mandate something that is part of a private industry, then that private industry has the ability to set prices however they like, because there is no competition and there is no consumer decision anymore. And therefore, in my opinion, we must get back to the place where we realize that when the Constitution tells us that we have rights that are not specifically delineated in the Constitution, one of those rights is the right to decide our own health care. Healthcare decisions are a right. Now, that doesn't mean I can go in and demand that a doctor treat me or a hospital treat me. What it means is that government does not have the authority to tell me you have to get a vaccine. I am completely and utterly against government mandated vaccines. I am against government mandating masks. I am against government mandating that I have to have health insurance or that a business that I work for has to provide it for me. Because anytime government does that, it skews the free market. I believe that we are in an era when there is great opportunity for healthcare innovation and healthcare payment innovation if we could just get the government out of our way. I believe there are people out there who want to provide new and exciting solutions that will create affordability, but you got to get the government out of healthcare.
Yeah, I think that what you said is just so important in terms of especially going, the recent COVID-19 and everything we're experiencing there, that, how much of a part of the federal move to really, necessarily consolidate all the regulations in part, how much did that really impact the response time, the response from the medical community to do that? And, it was, you touched base on it, but we didn't hear that from a national conversation. I want to touch base on something I think is also important, Donald, and it's really not an easy question. It's really not. But when we look at Indiana and we take a look at some of the challenges in regards to some of the municipalities, is that what would be your envision and how would you work with, mayors, and I'm not going to mince word here. Let's talk about Marion County, for example, that has really struggled with dealing with the crime, that has really failed to protect private property. What would be your role and what would be that fine line between, the state government and helping the local community? And I know you probably put some thought into it. So let's hear it.
Well, I'll tell you that my first reaction, and I have some mentors who are extremely more well-versed and smarter than I am. Thank goodness, because if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm leaving the room. I want people around me who are able to give me the information that I need to make good decisions. And I believe that the citizens of, let's take the city of Indianapolis, they're still all Hoosiers. So if I'm elected governor, whether there's a mayor or not, I'm still, as governor, responsible to protect the rights of the individuals in the state of Indiana. So let's take, for example, the rioting that went on in Indianapolis. If you tell me that the first night of rioting was a complete and utter surprise, then I'll say, okay, so I'll give you one night, but it won't happen a second night. And if a mayor of a city isn't going to protect the physical citizens and their property, then I believe the governor has a responsibility to do that. I believe, here again, it is the responsibility of government to secure people's rights, which means that if someone is infringing on someone else's property rights or their personal rights, then I believe that that is what government is supposed to step in and stop. Now, again, I completely and totally support any and all peaceable protests. Whether I agree with what somebody is protesting or not, I absolutely will defend their right to protest. But the minute that becomes an assault on someone else's rights, that's where the line gets drawn. Because I was taught that your right to swing your fist stops where my nose begins.
Yeah, yeah, very, very well said, Donald. One of the things that I think is always a challenge as we look at government and the role of government, and how it impacts society in general, is that the care and the ensuring of those with disability or veterans, and ensuring that at some point there's some safeguards or some things put in place. And I think too many times the staunch conservatives always look at it and they're really quick to label like everything socialism, but they're usually pretty fine whenever we're bailing out corporations and everything else. So how do you envision that
which is
role?
Really more socialism than the other? Let's be honest. The definition of socialism is when government owns the means of production. So when government bails out a corporation, that's more socialist than giving somebody a hand up when they're down.
Very well said, and you probably could have answered the question like in one sentence. Just
Sorry,
now.
I apologize.
No, it was phenomenal. Like you answered in one question, because I think that's something that the people are legitimately concerned when you look at equality and how do we accomplish that in terms of safeguarding that we are looking out for those with disability, those who are struggling, and in your vision, what type of role does government play in that?
Well, again, I think I think there's a fine line. But again, I believe that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Indiana all focus on safeguarding individual rights. I tell people all the time, we live in an era where everybody wants to talk about identity politics, and there is no more important identity than the identity of the individual. We're all unique, and whether you look at race, gender, sexual orientation, disabilities, veteran status, all of these things are, in my opinion, secondary to the idea that you're a unique individual. And it is not right for government or anybody else to put everybody in a category and say, well, here's a one-size-fits-all situation, solution to your problem. Because I don't believe there's any such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution for anything. Because we are all unique. And we do all have very specific needs and desires and wants. And I think to really boil it down, to answer the question in a very direct way, in order to protect people's individual rights, government has to focus on the idea of individuals. And we need to stop focusing on corporations. We need to stop focusing on special interest groups. We need to be aware that, for example, when you talk about folks with disabilities, there are unique situations, and people need to be treated with the equality of opportunity. I can't make everybody equal. I cannot give a veteran who's lost his legs in a war his legs back. But what I can do is I can make sure that he has the same opportunity for life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness as defined by him, not me.
Yeah, very, very well said. One of my questions, Donald, was going to be that, for the people for the first time that are hearing your message, what exactly would you say to them? But like the last 25, 30 minutes, everything you've stated is, if they don't understand it by now, the ideas regarding, the pursuit of happiness, the freedom and liberty, everything that your campaign is working towards, then perhaps maybe they're not going to get it. I do want to touch base on this because we hear this, time and time again in terms of the dominating parties, the Democratic and Republican Party. And so what would your thoughts be, and what would you specifically say to those who look at voting for a third party candidate is a wasted vote? What are your thoughts? Let's hear it, because I used, I don't even want to say I used to think like that, but I'm kind of over the voting of the lesser of two evils. I'm just
Certainly.
I'm just past that point. So what could you say to those people who look at it in that perspective?
Well, first of all, let me say this. What I hear is there are only two valid options. And I'm going to tell your listeners that that is a correct statement. There are two valid options: big government, limited government. Governor Holcomb and Dr. Meyers are two members of the same big government group. They're the same person. They want to raise taxes. They want to increase spending. They want to hang more debt around your children and your grandchildren's necks. And that's all there is to it. There is no difference. That's what those two gentlemen are here to do. And I want to reduce taxes. I want to reduce spending. I want to reduce the size and scope of state government. Think about, here's a really interesting current situation. In response to the racial unrest, Governor Holcomb has decided to create a new cabinet position and to spend Hoosier taxpayer dollars to bring in a third-party company from outside of the state. This is the same thing he did when the Department of Child Services had their issues. Let's create let's create a new cabinet position, more government. Let's bring somebody in from out of state. Let's pay him a couple $1 million of Hoosier taxpayer money to tell us how to fix our problem. Now, there's a couple of issues with that. One, that's big government. And if you want big government, Eric Holcomb is your guy, because he has increased the size of the Indiana state government in the last 3.5 years, more than had been done in the previous 12. He undid pretty much everything that had been done to reduce the size of government in just 3.5 years. Dr. Meyers wants to shut down everything again, mandate masks, and he wants to close the schools and then reopen the schools for childcare. So it's not safe for your kid and a teacher to be in the classroom together. But Dr. Meyers thinks, even though that's not safe, it is safe to send your kid to do virtual learning in that same classroom with a child care worker. Now that makes no sense, but these are big government solutions. So the reality is that you do only have two options. You can waste your vote on big government, or you can vote for yourself. You can vote for self-rule. You can vote for more money in your pocket. Now, if you think that putting more money back in your pocket, having more rights, more freedoms, and less government interference in your life is a wasted vote, I can't help you. Because the reality is, the reason that the other two parties will try to convince you that if you vote for the Libertarian Party, it's a wasted vote, is because they are scared they will lose control of your life and your money.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that with all things considered, I think there's more and more people who truly feel disconnected, and even to the point where they feel stranded out there trying to identify in regards to all the identity politics that are taking place in America. And I keep emphasizing this point time and time again, Donald, is that as challenging as it's been through COVID this entire year, it also presents a very unique opportunity. And what I mean by that is if we can get people to align and to understand and to put partisan politics aside for just one moment and to be able to assess individual liberty, individual freedom, and what that means in your community, and how important now that local elections are, I think it's a prime time for the ideas of the Libertarian Party to move forward. And for those people who are listening to these, someone had commented earlier in the post that I think I'm identifying now as more as a libertarian. It's one person at a time to understand that. I mean, we've been voting Democrat and Republican for the past 100 years, and where are we? Nationally, we're $30 trillion in debt, foreign intervention policies across the globe, and the wealth disparity in our country, where the top 1% just continue to grow even through this downturn in the economy. You see where the billionaires have just increased so much, where the middle class has just been really, corroded time and time again. So this election time, this cycle is just so important to take a look at those things. And that's why I'm very excited about your running for governor of the state of Indiana and what that means. So, Don, I want to afford you the opportunity for closing thoughts. And then also please make sure to plug your website and how people can support you. I did see one of your posts, and ideally, whenever we're going up against these two strong party strongholds, funding is so important to get behind. Absolutely. So have at it. How can people learn more about you? How can they support your work? And so that we can make sure that Indiana voters make a correct decision this coming November.
Absolutely. So the website again is rainwaterforindiana.com. And actually you can use the number 4 or FOR, either one. And if you can't remember either of those, DonaldRainwater.com and DonRainwater.com both work as well. I tried to make sure that we covered as many bases as we could.
Good deal.
And you'll notice that there is a donate button there. Obviously, we would love to have your financial support. We also want your vote on November 3rd. And, again, I think it's really important that we sum up what we are all about with a couple of key phrases. And of course, you see the life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness as defined by the individual, as defined by you, not the government. I think it's also really, really important, especially in what's been going on over the last 5 months, that we make it clear that all Hoosiers are essential. There's no such thing as essential workers and non-essential workers, because your family, your household depends on your income. which is why I also make it a point to tell people that every Hoosier business provides the necessities of life to the people who depend on that business for their income. It is completely and utterly out of touch to separate Hoosiers into essential and non-essential, businesses into those that provide the necessities of life and those that don't. It makes no sense. And it is extremely important that we remember that the only wasted vote is the one that you cast in deference to your conscience. Because if you don't vote your conscience loses.
Donald, very well said. Very well said. I want to thank you again, Donald, for a great conversation today. It's August 24th today. Perhaps maybe we could do this again prior into the election cycle with everything that's taken place.
Absolutely, that would be great.
Yes, want to wish you the best of luck with your campaign, and then also for these people, our audience that are tuning in. Please do me a favor. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this conversation tonight. But please make sure to like and share this and become active in the political landscape of your municipality, your states. I think it's just so important now. It speaks volumes, and we're seeing it happen in some of the states, and I think that there's going to be a huge migration this past year where people are starting to understand, Donald, the importance of the state that you live in, the political landscape, and that's why we need the people that are listening in to tune in and support the ideas of freedom and liberty.
Absolutely. And I think it's, to kind of piggyback on that just briefly, I think it's so important that we learn as a society to evaluate the people, not the party, because it's the people who make the decisions.
Yep. I completely agree. So again, thank everyone. Thank you again for tuning in to this broadcast. Again, you can go to rainwaterforindiana.com. Please make sure to go there, check it out to find out how you can volunteer, donate to support Donald Rainwater and his campaign for Indiana governor. And then also you can jump over to his Facebook page as well, which, he's very active there, which is at Rainwater for Indiana. So, Donald, thank you so much for a great conversation, and would love to do this again, sir.
Absolutely. So would I. Thank you so much.
Thank you.